Were your guys' allergies really bad after today, all day today?
Yes, it was rough.
Oh my gosh. I've been sneezing up a storm.
Good evening, everyone. Pursuant to Section 54956 of the California Government Code, a special meeting of the City Council is hereby called for September 21st, 2022 at 6 p.m. We do have a quorum. So, Margaret, if we could get a roll call, please.
Councilmember Mendoza,
Here.
Councilmember Meyer,
Here.
Councilmember Rary,
Here.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Here.
Mayor Bryant.
Here. Okay, at this time, we will go into item A. Tonight, we'll have a report on the safety of the California Resources Production Corporation's pipeline and expired pipeline franchise agreement. And Mickey Sabota will present on the item. Mickey?
Great. First things first, can you confirm that you guys can hear me?
Yes,
Excellent.
we can.
So good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. So about a little over a year and a half ago, staff brought an item for Council's consideration for a public hearing to extend a franchise between the City of Brentwood and California Resources Production Corp. For their use of a gas transmission pipeline that traverses the southwesterly portion of the city. Council had a robust discussion and ultimately did not provide any action or did not take any action on this particular item. In large part because of a lot of questions and discussions surrounding pipeline safety, maintenance, integrity, franchise agreements, things of that nature. So to ensure that Council had all the information and to answer a lot of these technical questions about safety, staff went out and sought the expertise of a pipeline specialist. We did interview a couple different companies and ultimately executed an agreement with a company out of Berkeley called Berkeley Engineering and Research, Inc. And that is really the purpose of tonight's workshop, is for the folks from BEAR to present their findings to Council, to answer any technical questions Council may have regarding this pipeline. I do want to note two things before I hand the virtual mic over to BEAR. First thing is, we anticipate a robust discussion on this item tonight. In the staff report, we did provide possible next steps for Council's consideration. The first is to direct staff to bring back the franchise or consideration of the franchise as originally written. Option two is to direct staff to negotiate additional terms in that franchise agreement and bring it back for Council's consideration. We also have a third option of do nothing. That's certainly an option for Council to provide staff. And there may be a fourth or fifth option depending on Council's discussion tonight. The second thing I did want to note is that it is my understanding, I haven't been able to check the participant list yet, but it is my understanding that we do have several representatives from California Resources Production Corp virtually attending tonight. So as part of Council's discussion, if you have any questions specifically for the pipeline operator, it's my understanding that they are available to answer those questions. So with that, I am going to turn the virtual mic over to folks from BEAR, Dr. Glenn Stevick and Mingxi Zheng. Thank you.
Good evening. Mingxi and I have both spent quite a bit of time assessing all the reports and inspections and the history of this particular pipeline. And we're going to give you a presentation right now on what our findings were. But in summary, this is a pipeline that's probably been inspected more than almost any pipeline around, and it's in good condition. But Mingxi's going to give the presentation, and we'll both jump in depending on comments and questions. Mingxi?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Glenn. So I will just start by sharing my screen then, and we'll get going on this. So if everyone can see my screen share, let me know if you cannot.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Then I'll jump right into it. So yes, this, as Glenn said, we were hired as consultants to independently review the Brentwood pipeline that's running through the city. And in this presentation, I'll be going over what we reviewed and then the conclusions we came to, and be able to give more context as to why we came to that conclusion. So a bit of an intro to BEAR. So we are all consulting licensed engineers, licensed meaning we all have our professional engineering license through the state of California. And if you're Glenn, you also have it through multiple other states as well. Glenn started the company 35 plus years ago with experience across industries, including specifically pipelines. In the next slide, I'll kind of cover, and I'll let him also give some insight into his experience and why he's really experienced in this topic. But we specialize in failure analysis and risk mitigation in particular. And again, we're doing an independent third-party review of the pipeline condition running through Brentwood. Glenn, do you want to just give the background on yourself then?
You bet. So we're going to reintroduce ourselves a little more, in a little more detail. I did my PhD on how welds and pipelines fail, particularly at high temperature. As a result of that, the piping codes were changed, and my thesis was published as a Welding Research Council bulletin, and I served on the piping code committee for about 10 years. In addition, when San Bruno happened, I was asked by the governor's office to go down and assist and explain to people why it happened, and also served with the California Public Utilities Commission on making sure that type of explosion does not happen again. So coming up with inspection criteria for the gas pipelines, and most of the pipelines since then have been rigorously assessed, and they incorporate the kind of inspections we have here.
Yeah, so I'll bring up in this presentation too a little context into why we bring up the San Bruno pipeline as well, and why it is crucial to do reviews on pipelines like the one running through Brentwood. So quickly about me, I work for Glenn. I specialize in metallurgy and corrosion, specifically of metallics, and I've done failure analysis, quality assurance, and risk mitigation. Actually starting in the aerospace industry when I was right out of college at SpaceX and Virgin. So I joke that's basically a pipeline that we launch into space. So yeah, just 7 years experience in various aerospace manufacturing environments. Okay, so we'll jump right into it then. So I'm going to start off with the general pipeline overview. So basically, an intro to just pipelines in general, this specific pipeline, just to give everyone kind of a feeling of, what we're looking at, especially for those of us that maybe we only know it as the thing running under the neighborhood, or maybe you don't know anything at all. So hopefully this will be helpful, educational for everyone. Oops. So what are pipelines? Why are they important? So the US actually has approximately 2.8 million miles of pipeline running through it. And as you got a glimpse of, I'll show in the next map, just how ubiquitous it is throughout the whole country. It's actually responsible for almost 64% of the energy commodities consumed in the US, and a good portion of it is underground. So we don't see them even though they're there a lot of the time. And they're crucial to our daily living in the US. Again, that's 64% of the energy commodities consumed, and they transport basically, this is what powers our homes, our businesses, et cetera. And then something that will come up during this presentation, and I wanted to note here and introduce early, is something called the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. This is actually a division of the United States government. And it was created in 2004 to oversee the safety of this pipeline system. So this is a government organization, and their main job is just to ensure the safe and reliable operation of these pipelines, and kind of create like this check and balance system for it, because they are everywhere. And as I'll bring up, there have been incidences of pipelines causing fatalities and damage. So this here is from the American Energy Mapping. It shows visually just how common these pipelines are, the blue being interstate pipelines and then the red being intrastate. I guess it shouldn't be a big surprise, but in Texas, you can see there's a lot running out of there. But yeah, if you look at our, little area in California, you also see a pretty high density throughout the major counties. And then just to give everyone also context as to what we're looking at for your city, this is the map of the specific 3.5 miles that's running through the city of Brentwood. So the pipeline in totality is actually an over 35-mile long pipeline between Stockton, California and Pittsburgh. Okay, so what should we be concerned about? So big reason, why are we here in the first place? Why are me and Glenn reviewing this information? Well, there's been historic incidents such as the San Bruno pipeline that Glenn mentioned and worked on, that this actually caused a number of fatalities within the neighborhood of San Bruno. And what's really, I think, important to understand about these is that a lot of these are due to poor maintenance and inspection practices. So for San Bruno specifically, and then Glenn, if you ever want to jump in and talk more specifics.
I do on this one, but
I'll let you go ahead there.
This particular pipeline, it's not just weak welded areas. What had happened is there was a section of pipe that was only welded from the outside. The weld on the inside was not complete. And that would have been picked up if they did X-ray or the standard hydro test when the pipe leaves the manufacturing plant like they do today. Back then that wasn't done. And despite the weld only going halfway through the metal, it lasted from 56 to roughly 2010. But that pipe would have never survived today. What I mean is it wouldn't have been installed. It would have been caught before that happened.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that this pipe also due to population demand as well, the maintenance and upkeep that wasn't considered. But yeah, so again, modern technology definitely plays a big part in catching these things. And that specific topic there was something that Glenn and I looked at in reviewing the Brentwood pipeline specifically. Okay, so I'll jump into now the specific pipeline specs. So by specs, I mean, what is the pipe dimensions? How does it perform? What do we think it should be doing in general? So this is where kind of the engineering side of things comes in a bit, and I'll get a little more technical, but hopefully in a way that's digestible. So I kind of drew a little diagram here that shows this Brentwood pipeline. So the wall thickness is about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick. And then you have a pipe that's about over 1 foot outer diameter. So you can kind of hopefully visualize that. And then I'll go through these individual pipe properties and then give hopefully some understanding of what these words all mean, because these are critical to understand. Okay, so all these are actually in units of, you see PSI. So PSI stands for pounds per square inch. And this unit is used to compare how strong a material is to other materials. So we need similar units to compare things to each other. And just in general, the certain design criteria that we need to be able to talk in like relevant numbers. So I kind of created this little diagram here. If you imagine just like in inch square, it's measuring how much weight could go on that inch square before certain things happen. So one important unit for this, so this pipe was designated, I'll get into this in the next section, but it's called an X52 pipe, which means it has a yield strength of 52,000 PSI. So PSI, pounds per square inch. What is yield strength? So yield strength is how much pressure the pipe can hold before it breaks, yields. This pipe could experience this much pressure and still work in this situation. Glenn, did you want to elaborate?
Yeah, let me elaborate a little bit.
Mhm.
Yield strength is when the pipe first starts to stretch permanently a little bit. Now, this particular pipe, because of its grade, is what we call a strain hardening material. Its ultimate strength is actually 66,000 PSI. So it can actually go to a strength level 27% higher than yield. And because it strain hardens, if there is a weak spot, it will thin and strengthen. So it really won't break when it gets to a stress of 52. It would break when it got to a stress of 66,000 PSI. So it's a very good material.
That's a great clarification. Like the word break, I think in engineering, we like to be conservative a lot of times. So in our minds, we use these numbers to also tell ourselves like, hey, this is kind of like the limiting point of, what we want to look at. But yeah, to Glenn's explanation there's all these other details that are going on in the material and the processing that make it a little more complex, but we're going to kind of look at this.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to look at this number because it is the lower number. And then it's also going to highlight some other engineering decisions and limitations and why it's actually there's safety factors included, significant safety factors. So that leads me into the next specification. So this is something called the max allowable operating pressure, or the MAOP. The MAOP for this pipe is actually designated at 770 PSI. Okay, so this is how much pressure the pipe is allowed to operate with, decided by engineers. So when I say decided by engineers, there's a number of calculations going into this, and then added safety factors, which means they'll lower it even more just to make sure it's as safe as possible. So I just wanted to highlight how much lower that is to the yield strength of 52,000. So this is 770 compared to 52,000. Okay. And as we just talked about, this pipe this pipe can handle up to 52,000 PSI. And then one last metric that is important for this specific pipe is a nominal operating pressure. So the nominal operating pressure of this pipe is 510 PSI. So this is the pressure that the pipe actually operates at. And this has been measured over all the inspections and various other ways that I'll go over in the next section. But again, notice how it's not only lower than the yield strength of 52,000 PSI, but also lower than the MAOP of 770. Glenn, did you want to add anything else to that before I
Sure.
jump into the inspections?
What this really means is those two numbers, you have to calculate the actual stress in the metal from the pressure in the pipe. It's a fairly simple calculation. It's pressure times average radius divided by thickness. And when you do that, you end up with a safety factor of just under 3 for yield and a little more than 4 for ultimate when it would really break. So it's a great deal of safety factor in this pipeline.
Yeah, and then so then in the next section, so yeah, that kind of gives you kind of like a baseline understanding of what the pipe is, what are the important factors we need to consider in its performance, and basically what we as engineers are looking at to ensure or to understand its performance. So we did a review of past inspections that have been performed on this pipe by various other either engineering companies or the organizations, such as the PHMSA, that are crucial to understanding, again, the current condition of the pipe and to be able to assist in that decision, how you want to proceed with the contracts. So something I do want to start off with, this is important. Something called API 5L is a specification from the American Petroleum Institute. So in multiple different industries, there's all these guidelines that specify how you should manufacture the material and to ensure safety. So for example, if you think about your everyday objects at home and a lot of like toys, your kids' toys, you're seeing there's a UL mark. I'm sure people have noticed that UL is kind of an example of an organization such as the American Petroleum Institute that creates standards to make sure that, hey, when you create children's toys, we want a certain standard of safety, and these are the requirements that it needs to follow. So in the pipeline industry, we got API 5L. So this is the standard that describes, as I say, the manufacturing requirements of pipeline for petroleum natural gas transportation, which is the Brentwood pipeline. The API 5L is actually recognized on the federal level by a direct final rule in 2009. And this was published in the Federal Register. You can reference the edition listed there. So, and they said very clearly, the purpose of this update is to enable pipeline operators to utilize current technology, materials, and practices to help maintain a high level of safety relative to their pipeline operations. So the intention here was to give that guideline to ensure safe operation. This, along with many other things that are regulating the manufacture of the pipeline for this use, this one actually specifically requires 100% X-ray inspection for cracks. So remember, we mentioned earlier the San Bruno pipeline. We did not, that technology did not exist. So the issues there were not caught. So this is new technology that is now required by the standard and enforced by that Federal Register announcement. So the Brentwood pipe was manufactured to this requirement and meets it. Meeting the standard is really the first indicator of a safe pipeline. You know, we have these standards again for the reasons stated that I quoted earlier. And then just to give some, you know, technical background into what I'm talking about when I say X-ray. So it's actually really the same technology as human X-rays. So just like how human X-rays can show broken bones, when you X-ray a pipe, you can also reveal defects like cracks, or show that, for example, in the San Bruno pipeline, if that existed, it would help see that, hey, you know, this well did not penetrate all the way through. So that, you know, this is now a very modern, you know, we're all used to it, but this is an available technology that is used and again, required by API 5L to catch things before they ever get installed to use. The next inspection, or the first inspection I'll really kind of go more in depth into, is the Ramsgate engineering inspection from June 2011. So Ramsgate is an engineering third-party engineering company hired to inspect the pipeline. So they actually did their own MAOP calculation independent. So this is a kind of verification thing they did based on a worst possible scenario. And they actually calculated it to be 1,193 PSI. So again, compared to that MAOP we talked about before, that was 770 PSI. That means actually, so what this means is that they said based on their inspection, the pipe could handle pressures up to over 1,000 PSI. So
and that's actually with safety factors built in. So even getting to 11 or 1,200 PSI, there's still a safety factor between 2 and 3.
Yeah, so they're already incorporating this, and they're also they're calculating a number that's it could handle more than even the limit that's already been placed on the Brentwood pipeline. Another thing they concluded was that they found 0 dent indications or deformations, which means the pipe is in good condition. And overall, this is the pipe. They basically stated the pipeline is in satisfactory condition, and in no case do the MAOP need to be adjusted to satisfy any pipeline condition ID'd by these inspections. So basically, what they're saying is that this pipe is satisfactory. And they don't see the need for any adjustments to this basically safety limits, operation limits already specified for this pipe. One other inspection that was done even more recently than that was by TD Williamson in June 2016. So I think it should be highlighted that TDW is a company specializing specifically in pipeline inspection and maintenance. This is all they do. And they inspected the pipe using specific methodology developed for pipelines. So they're either standard inspection methods, again, within the industry, again, for example, if it's something from API 5L or something similar, or especially developed by TDW. And that's kind of their just proprietary, technology. And one aspect of that is a tool they use that takes linear samples through the pipe. So I'll show you in the next slide what that tool looks like, but it's actually this something that is put within the pipe and run through. In this specific case, it traveled 2 feet per second. it collected 750 samples per second, which also means, and for them, over 31 samples per inch. So if you think about, how big an inch is, and then imagine it's taking over 31 samples just in that, short length, there's a lot of data being collected, and it also rotates through the pipe.
And it's checking radius and thickness every time it takes these samples.
Yeah.
So it's really getting the integrity of the pipe.
Yeah. So that's a great point to highlight, is what it's collecting is measurements relating to if there's material loss or indications that would show something that would affect the performance of the pipe. So that tool is called a pipeline pig. It's a pretty complex piece of equipment, especially designed for pipelines. And as you can see, it's not something simple. So again, this is a very high level technology. It's very sophisticated. And again, it's very specific to pipelines. And it travels along the whole way collecting data, and that data is analyzed by TD Williamson at the end. So in their report, they said they found nothing in the pipeline inspection that meets the criteria for immediate repair conditions relating to metal loss. So basically, they didn't find anything that indicated they needed repair, especially for wall loss, because one of the big issues in pipeline performance is if the thickness of the wall gets too thin, then you're affecting the ability of the pipe to hold in the pressure of the gas running through it. And yeah, so basically this summary, just nothing found that they said that nothing was found that requires further inspection. So that's a great sign. And basically they're saying, okay, we liked what we saw. We feel comfortable with it. We actually don't think you even need to look at it. We don't need to look at it more. And then finally, there was actually a audit in 2018 from the PHMSA. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a government organization. It's part of the Department of Transportation, and it's responsible for developing and enforcing regulations for the safe, reliable, and environmentally sound operation of the pipelines in the United States. They were specifically created in response to pipeline incidents and to minimize or hopefully eliminate all that risk. So they have a strong incentive to make sure that any pipeline in operation is considered safe and sound for the communities around it.
And FSMA went through a very large reorganization after San Bruno to put more teeth in their regulations, and they really are quite rigorous.
Yeah, so this audit involves reviewing all tests and inspections performed on the pipe. So in a way similar to what we are doing as well. And yeah, I mean, they're very thorough, like as Glenn mentioned, especially after San Bruno. And, look, this audit happened significantly after San Bruno. So this audit was also benefiting from that reorg that happened. They want to make sure that something like San Bruno doesn't happen again. And in an email they shared with the city that no violations were observed. So really I think that kind of explains itself. So conclusion, so this wraps up.
May I ask a question on that? It actually says that there was 2 items found in the TW report on our agenda, page 407.
Yeah, the 2 concerns. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was 2 concerns of immediate repair. So how can you come up and say that it says there was no concerns for immediate? There was no concerns for a 1-year repair, but there was 2 for immediate repair.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to leave this for after I wrap up this last slide?
Go ahead and wrap up the last slide, and then we'll go into in-depth questions.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So wrap up. After reviewing all these metrics, all these inspections that we were able to get access to, this pipeline is well maintained, in good condition, and has more inspections than the average pipeline, which Glenn can personally attest to and hands-on experience. And the inspections were sufficiently thorough. These were done by professional engineering companies, not only having the right equipment, but the specialty in pipeline inspection. A remaining life calculation on the pipe based on recorded pressure history can be completed to plan out future inspections and maintenance. Like, this is something that I think is important too, is that you're doing this over the lifetime of this pipe too. So this is a added option, is that with the information you have, you can actually do predictive predictive calculations to ensure that you're performing specific or sufficient future inspections and maintenance. And finally, should a new agreement be negotiated, it should require new, most up-to-date inspection technologies in addition to the ones already done. So again, for example, that X-ray is now kind of a default, but technology is always being updated and innovated. So that should be considered to ensure that you're getting the best information possible. And that's basically all we have presentation-wise. And I included on this side too, just websites for the API and PHMSA if there is interest there.
For the presentation, Councilmember Meyer.
I'm happy to let Councilmember Rary go first if she wants to ask that question.
Yeah, would you mind?
So on page 407 of the report, our page 407, the agenda, it says DENT, immediate prioritized repairs, GAS in parentheses. There are two conditions, 1B, a dent that has an indication of metal loss, cracking, or a stress riser. Yet you said that there was nothing for immediate repair. How can the report say one thing and then you report that it doesn't include that?
I am trying.
They actually did the repair work. I think that one was that the Byron one, or that may have been the Antioch one?
This is page 17.
Let me look at what your page is on here. It's a TDW report. It just says page 1 of 1 on your page that you have here.
Is it in the packet?
It's in the packet. It's DENT, immediate prioritized repairs.
Okay, what packet page is it on?
As far as our packet page is page 407.
407, okay.
Glenn, are you able to find
Yes,
it?
hang on here.
Okay.
Uh,
Don't have it on my end.
There we go. Okay, it says condition 1B, number 2. Okay. This particular type of pipe can withstand dents pretty easily. So any small dent, it's not going to crack because of the strain hardening of this particular type of steel. And it's something that they would simply wrap that location, but it's not something that would really affect the
But you told us that there was nothing to report. That was what was in your report here, that there was nothing of immediate repairs to report it. And they did go in there and wrap it.
Yes.
But so it's confusing when you say there's nothing there, yet the report itself says that there was. And
Okay.
they actually did repairs.
You're absolutely right, but it has been repaired and dealt with. The pig that goes through this pipe is checking every 31 points every inch. So when they find two dents, they wrap them, and then it's stronger than the regular pipe at that point.
Well, they actually found 558, I think it was, but these are the only two that they said were
Right.
prioritized.
No, I agree.
So,
Oh, you're right.
yeah. Okay. I will defer back to Councilmember Meyer and then follow up with my other questions after that. Thank you. Whoops.
Member Meyer?
Thank you. In reading the staff report and looking at our previous notes and doing some online checking, there was a Mercury News article from 2018 that quoted of 381 violations tracked, around 290 were by CRC and 2 subsidiaries. And most violations were for missing integrity tests required every 5 years. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
It says the group produced its findings based on the California Public Records Act request filed with the Department of Conservation for all violations notices issued to offshore oil operations by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources since 2015. I bring that. I remember the meeting that we had last year, and there appeared to be no representatives there that could actually answer the questions about safety and about the track records. And so the track records, it felt at the time like a red flag, and that we needed to dig deep
Sure.
into this and to really understand the history here.
Well, were those related to this particular pipeline or just in general?
In general, but that
Okay,
speaks
right.
to
Sure,
the safety of the company as a whole. And so that's why I brought that part up.
sure.
Can you offer any response on that, or?
Well, I can somewhat in that,
Okay.
despite what they're doing elsewhere, this particular pipeline is getting, as I would say, more attention than is typical. And that's a good thing.
Okay.
I mean, these pigs, and my understanding is they are running them every few years,
Mhm.
and they do pick up small dents and risers and other issues. And those areas, once they get to a particular level, and these are standardized, they're wrapped so that section of pipe is now at least as strong as the rest of the pipe when it's new.
Okay.
I just want to highlight that Bear was hired to review the information on the Brentwood pipeline specifically.
Mhm.
Right.
I totally appreciate that. In fact, your report was very thorough. I feel like if we're going to move anything forward, we need to understand as a whole what our risks are and what factors into that.
Sure.
The track record to me speaks to overall how they determine their safety records to be appropriately met. So I'm just everything I've got is mostly around the risks and the track records. Are there any health risks from leaks of any kind that are, if it's near, because we have this one is near a school and near
Sure.
your living community. Can you talk to that? Speak to that?
Yes. Certainly, any energy transmission mechanism, whether it's power lines or gas pipelines, there is some risk. This particular pipeline has very low risk because they do monitor it, and it's fairly modern pipe that's 100% X-ray, and it was designed so that a pig can go through it. A lot of the pipelines from the 80s and past, the design of the radiuses and changes in direction made it such that you couldn't put a pig through the line. So you couldn't look for these things. Now we can run the pig through there. It has its own power source, and it collects 31 sensors, 31 samples of thickness and radius every inch. And then we download that data off the pig when it gets through, and we go find those areas where there's an issue. And in this case, there were two that needed some remedial action. But that's a regular thing with this pipeline, and that's not usual. And that's why the FSMA, the federal group that did the audit, came to pretty much the same conclusion we have. They're doing a pretty good job on this pipeline.
Okay. Do I understand correctly that on the National Pipeline Mapping System, there are no incidents or accidents reported?
For this pipeline,
Okay.
that's my understanding, but
Okay.
I'm not aware
Outside
of
of
any
that, yeah.
accidents on this pipeline. I can't say outside of that.
Okay.
There certainly are elsewhere.
Yeah. And then has CRC complied with all of the recommendations from the Pipeline Safety Trust?
I'm not sure we've seen those.
That was from the staff report as well.
Okay.
Write down a page number though.
Yeah, let's see where that is.
Yeah. I'll see if I can track that down. We can move on to someone else.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I'll probably have more later.
Councilmember Rare.
Yes, regarding the audit that was done, while there were question texts and issue summaries, no answers were actually given. Is that somewhere else in the report that I can go to see what the answers were from CRC, or because these were PHMSA concerns? It's on page 706 and 707.
Okay.
I don't believe.
So, and it has to do with, does the operator have a program in place to minimize detrimental effects of interference currents on its pipeline system? Does the process for designing, installing the cathodic protection system provide for a minimization of detrimental effects of interference currents on existing adjacent metallic structures?
Sure. Well, that is addressed to some extent, to a large extent, actually, by the pigging. When you have straight currents or soils that are getting through the coating on a pipeline, it shows up by thinning. So what typically happens is you see an area of thinning because of the pigging, and then one of the remedial actions will be cathodic protection, or is there damage to the coating that's protecting the pipe from the soil? And because we're not seeing any general loss of material here, that kind of thing is really not necessary.
So, and then reviewing, I guess, their operations and the O&M procedure, it says the procedure is adequate, but seems light on requiring CRC to monitor for interference currents.
Right.
And the next question was, does the process give sufficient guidance for personnel to repair or replace pipe that has internally corroded to an extent that there is no longer sufficient remaining strength in the pipe wall?
Right.
And so it says in the issue summary of the O&M, it says the repair procedures only address general corrosion and external corrosion. Internal corrosion repair mitigation is not specifically identified.
Okay.
That CRC amend the repair procedures to specifically identify repair for identified internal corrosion. So, but it doesn't say that they actually address those.
Okay. Well, they are being addressed, and you can see what they've done to address dents and those type of things is using a full encirclement sleeve or a clack spring. And the contractors that are doing the pigging inspection, they're doing the standard B31G, which is a code that actually goes into the size of any dent or corrosion area so that you can calculate when you have to do something. And that's what your contractors are doing, or CRC's contractors, I should say.
All All right, and so it's federally mandated that they need to do this every 7 years, correct?
Yes.
So the very first one that they did was 20 years after they installed the pipeline. It was from 1991 to 2011 when Ramsgate did it.
2011 is the first, yes, that I
Yeah,
understand.
so 20 years since they initially installed it. Then they did it 6 years later.
Yes.
And based on CRC says that while we are required to do it every 7 years, we do it every 5 years. So based on that second one that they did in 2016 was 1 year past what they normally would, what they said that they do. And it is now 2022. So there's been no report of another one done based on standards set by CRC.
Right. My understanding is they're about to do it, and COVID interfered with what was happening this last time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much essential work.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, then I think it speaks to the fact that they're doing it every 5 years and technically they have the 7 years. So,
But they haven't. They
yeah.
haven't.
So, I mean,
Years, and then
yeah,
6 years, and now it's 6 years again. So they haven't,
Sure.
yeah. So it's 6 years,
Yeah.
right? So but
they haven't
let's
done
get
it.
it done. Yeah. And that's going to be, something to require.
Yeah. I don't feel confident that they're doing what's required of them based on only two in the 25 years that they've had the pipeline. So actually 20, yeah. Anyway, more than 20 years that they've had the pipeline. That is concerning. While they've been fortunate that there hasn't been a problem or very minor ones, some of the concern also. I'll save that for my discussion later. Thank you.
It's actually good to be concerned and stay on your toes, and you have to hold them to the fire to do it in the next year or two. This pipeline is in good shape, fortunately, and there's no signs of general corrosion due to anything like stray current or soils or significant dents. So I think it's in good shape, but yes, it's always good to stay on your toes and make sure that they follow up.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Member Meyer?
You. The PST compliance I was referring to is on the bottom of our packet, page 4, and on the top of 5.
Okay, let me
And
go
I'm just
there.
curious if you're aware if they've complied with any of those or all of those recommendations.
A second. You mean hazard material incidents?
Where it's talking about, let's see, the pipeline mapping data, managing land records, disclosing pipeline easements in real estate transactions, and implementing communications plans.
That part I'm not sure,
Okay.
but it's again something that, yes, should be followed up on.
Okay. I'm interested in understanding too. So this pipeline was laid in 1991 prior to when the local school and the local senior living community were there. Are there any current regulations to prevent that from happening now, or could a pipe potentially be laid that close to those kinds of vulnerable communities?
They can, but they have to have certain safety factors, high safety factors like you have here.
Would those safety factors be the same now that they would have back in 1991?
I'd have to check.
Okay.
And we'd be glad to do that if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yeah, I don't know if this has been answered, or I know that we have talked about, there's been x-rays on the pipe. When's the last time that they've done an x-ray on that pipeline? From Stockton to Pittsburgh?
Well, that's not something that's done after a pipeline's in place.
Okay.
It's the welds that can join the pieces of pipe together in the field are x-rayed. And
Okay.
the pipe when it's manufactured is x-rayed.
Okay, so all that occurs before it's even put into the ground.
Right.
Okay,
And the reason is cracks grow as a function of how long they are. And just giving you San Bruno again, they only welded it halfway through. So you had a crack that was halfway through the pipe the moment it was put in the ground. And it still lasted 50 years. So the very minor cracks that we are unable to pick up with x-ray, they typically don't grow. And that's why these pipelines are x-rayed when they're made. And then you run pigs through them to pick up any large deformations and metal loss over time.
so I know you use the term typically. So has that occurred in the past though? Have you, in your experience, has seen where pipes before being put in place have been x-rayed through the, regarding the weldings, but still came out to cause some issues or have issues in the future?
The only place I've seen it was the Alaska pipeline, where someone did one x-ray and copied it many times. And then we found cracks in welds that hadn't really been x-rayed. In this
So
case,
how many-
you have 100% x-ray.
So this pipeline has been 100% x-rayed, right? You're saying?
Yes, it has.
Now, do they do it multiple times before it's actually put in the ground?
Typically, it's each section of pipe is x-rayed robotically as it leaves the plant. And then in the field, you do it by hand on the joining welds that hold the pieces of pipe together. And I don't think it's been done since then. And there's no really easy way to do that once it's in the ground.
Okay.
Our
Thank you,
best
sir.
inspection method is the pigging, and they can now even see cracks with that.
Thank you.
I had a clarifying question. I remember in our previous conversation that it was said that there was about 10 years remaining in the gas field that is currently being tapped into to use this particular pipeline. Do you know if that's still the case? And if so, after 10 years, is there another possible use from another company to use the same pipelines? I know these pipelines are pretty well used.
Sure. I'm not familiar with when that particular reservoir will run out or expire.
Thank you. Councilmember Rare.
Yes, in the initial or in the recitals that we had in the past and currently, it says CRC desires to transport natural gas and other substances resulting from the drilling for production, transportation, and storage of petroleum, oil, gas, and other hydrocarbon substances through an underground pipeline in the public rights of way and other lands owned by the city. So can this pipeline be used for other types of for petroleum, oil, or other hydrocarbon substances, hydrogen, or chlorine that's a byproduct of refinery?
This pipeline could be used for a wide range of hydrocarbons.
All right.
Chlorine, I
And that includes
couldn't
oil.
imagine they would use that for this, use this pipeline for that. And hydrogen is, there's not enough supply that I'm aware of that would use this size of pipe for.
Okay. Yeah, operate and maintain a pipeline for the conveyance of oil and gas within the city limits.
Sure. This pipeline's very, it's capable of oil and gas. It makes no difference to the life of this pipe.
Okay, all right, thanks.
If there are no further clarifying questions of staff or presenter at this time, we'll open public comments. I'll turn to you, Margaret.
I received no written public comments on this item. If you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature. I'll call your name if provided and unmute you to speak. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. I do have 2 hands raised. I'll go ahead and share the timer screen. And I'll call on Danny Dorman, followed by Rod. Mr. Dorman, go ahead.
Yes, Margaret, before you start the clock, and I tried to reach out, we didn't have the Pledge of Allegiance, nor did we have our initial opening comment. And so I humbly asked to be given 6 minutes because I get the first, and now we're here in the second. And I see my clock still going down, so I don't know if it's something you got to talk to the lawyer about or whatever. Am I going to get an answer? Because the clock's still going.
Mr. Dorman, we are not able to have a dialogue during public comments.
Okay, well, not a dialogue, but more of a, can the attorney, well, now I'm losing time. Can the attorney verify, or, you know, am I just gonna, okay, frick. All right, well, why are we here? Okay, the lie of omission is killing me. Staff mentioned about the council not doing anything in 2021. They failed to talk about the 2 things that were talked about in 2022, which were, and I sent screenshots to all of you, but it was, how do we stop and what does it take? That was what staff was supposed to work on. That's it. Having these people come in and talk about how nice and beautiful and how safe and secure we are has nothing to do with what staff was asked to do. So this is totally a waste of time. Secondly, I don't know why staff hasn't told other people this before, but you folks do your homework. I mean, I have the over under on, I don't know, I'll get back to you. That's not really what we mean. My goodness. Oh, and COVID. It's like, oh my God. I mean, that old card. So, and thank you, Karen, for, calling out. It was a simple question, how can it not have any problems, but then there are problems? And we'll get back to you if that's what you want us to do. And again, I go back to the very original question. Why are we here? This was only supposed to be about how do you turn it off? And why are they still using it? Because we didn't give them permission. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rod. Rod, go ahead.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, I second Danny's request to get more information afterwards about why we didn't get a public comment at the start of the meeting. But at any rate, and I do have a written comment tonight, which is getting to be unusual for me. But the the council so far is doing a pretty good job of asking the right questions, but I'm going to read this anyway. That gentleman there, Glenn, just told you why you shouldn't go any farther with this. You're going to have to keep on top of the operator of this pipeline to make sure they meet requirements. And why? You know, we get nothing out of this pipeline or next to nothing. Why should cities spend time and money to keep on top of them? Anyway, I'll read. Tonight, you're being told this gas pipeline running past 3 schools, 4 neighborhoods, in Brentwood is deemed by experts to be safe. I strongly urge you to question that assertion. Report never states the pipeline is safe. It only states it's in good condition and well maintained. Please do ask them if they will guarantee that it is safe. According to PHMSA, there's about 3 significant pipeline incidents for every 4 days on average. 3 out of every 4 days. This is the agency you're supposed to be trusted to be safeguarding our town. It's like an everyday occurrence. One of these things has a problem. Their definition of significant is fatality or injury requiring inpatient hospitalization, $50,000 or more in total costs, highly volatile liquid releases of 5 barrels or more, or other liquid releases of 50 barrels or more, liquid releases resulting in an unintentional fire or explosion. In 2021 alone, there were 267 significant incidents, 11 fatalities, 31 injuries, and $193+ million in costs. Fatalities are not just historic incidences like Minxie here said, they happen every year. Don't let these paid industry consultants try to pull the wool over your eyes by implying San Bruno was a one-time event. Gas pipelines do explode without warning, disastrously, sometimes killing and maiming innocent people and destroying their homes and property, and literally blowing their homes to smithereens with them in them. You really want to be the council members who voted to renew this franchise in the event it should take even one life in Brentwood. I have a lot of questions you should be asking. I do think that it's particularly telling that PHMSA on their site lists cause of incidents, but not the safety ratings of the pipelines on which they occurred. So-called experts paid by the industry are happy to come in here and tell us they believe the pipeline is safe, but they don't say anywhere in their reports that incidents will not happen, nor do they give any real risk assessment. They say enough to try to convince us this is safe, but they're very careful not to say anything that would make them liable for any incidents that may occur, because they know that these incidents do occur and they know they are impossible to predict. Tonight's presentation is one-sided. It talks about safety measures, makes no attempt to quantify the hazards they're attempting to mitigate. My advice tonight is to listen politely, ask the hard questions, take the option to do nothing. Brentwood does not benefit much from this hazard, and we're all better off without it. At minimum, before considering whether to approve this franchise, this council should receive a presentation that clearly defines the hazards, not just the mitigation.
The speaker's timer had expired. I have no additional hands raised.
Thank you. At this time, we will open council discussion. Councilmember Mendoza.
Nothing said today changes my mind as how I felt last time. Was it Huntington Beach that had the accident not that long ago? So if these tests and these studies and all of this really works, then why do we keep having accidents, right? They're accidents. And, you know, we have people now where there wasn't. So I would like it to just stop, have anything flowing through. It runs right by the senior facility. It runs right by Cray. It runs right by Heritage High School. And again, I said it before and I said again, it's not a risk I'm willing to take. I think they need to move the pipeline. I know that they still need it for their business, but I don't think it should be at the sacrifice of a possible accident for our residents. So while it is safe now, every pipeline is safe until it isn't. And unless you can guarantee me 100% that never anyone in my city will ever get hurt by something happening on this pipeline, I can't vote for it. And even when you're left, you know, we bring up San Bruno, that poor family whose son was blown to smithereens, they're still in court. And it was 2010. I can't be like, I can't take that risk. So I agree with the callers, especially Rod. I can't do it in good conscience. And no one's telling me it's 100% safe. So if it's not 100% safe, it's not a risk I'm willing to take for my residents.
Thank you. Councilmember Meyer.
Thank you. I was hoping to hear some responses to the callers' questions.
Maybe you could help us clarify those questions so we can give a more direct answer.
There were definitely ones about the hazards. The fact that it's kind of, as Councilmember Mendoza was talking about, that accidents are still happening in pipes that have been determined to be safe. There isn't any way, I understand there isn't any way to give 100% guarantee, but of course that lessens my interest in supporting something that doesn't have that guarantee. I mean, we had a PG&E explosion, I think it was earlier this year, and a fire in the street that seemed like we all thought that was safe. So, I mean, I think I want to hear a little bit more about the hazardous risks involved. And if anyone else remembers any of the other comments or questions that were shared, I would love to have those get piped in, unintended.
Well, let me address that to some extent. It's difficult to calculate some exact risk. However, I'm not aware of any pipeline that's pigged every 5 to 7 years that's blown up. These pipelines, if you go back and look at the accidents, they're older pipelines that were exempted from inspections, or they're old enough so that the pig can't get down them. And that was one of the problems with San Bruno. They couldn't inspect it afterwards. So because this is a newer pipeline from the 90s, they did design it so it could be pigged. All the turns are gradual, so the pig can get through. And so I'm not aware of any pipeline that's been pigged like this that's blown up. And we are not industry representatives. We have worked for oil companies in the past on consulting issues, but we're not paid annually, monthly, daily at all by any oil industry.
And I think something we also that's important to consider in risk assessments. Yes, there are these incidents that happen. I'm not denying that at all. I don't think any of us will, but the reason you don't hear about the ones that aren't having issues, again, the flip side, because they're being inspected, because, reviews like this are being done, there are actions that can be taken to ensure that it doesn't happen. We learn from the past mistakes so that we don't repeat them, and that information is taken seriously.
Have you as consultants had to recommend not allowing continued use of a pipeline based on your assessment and your analysis?
Yes. Using the exact same calculations that TDW is using, which is an ASME piping code calculation. And if the corrosion area is dense, whatever, you can calculate that this is not acceptable. It's gone below the limit, still has some margin because you inspect it every 7 years. That's how the 7-year came up. They've looked at typical corrosion rates in pipes, and this one has low corrosion rates compared to average. So it's going to have more margin between discovery and when it would be an issue.
Okay.
Councilmember Berry.
So before I get into comments, just for the public who may be listening in on this, or who are concerned that we're limiting gas coming into our city for your gas stoves, for your gas fireplaces, because we stopped allowing regular fireplaces to be built in our city, and for those who have gas dryers, gas heaters, all of those things. I want to let you know that the pipeline we're talking about starts at Union Island Central Facility near Stockton and ends at Chevron's pipeline, Los Bananos Station, Pittsburgh. From there, Chevron takes custody of it and delivers the gas to the Chevron refinery via another pipeline. So this is for the people out there who are concerned that everything that they have in their house will become obsolete. And so I don't want there to be a panic out there. I do have a question for staff. And this is in the recitals, where it talks about on page 17 and page 29, the grant of franchise. The franchise is granted, among other things, then as necessary to construct, maintain, operate, and remove a pipeline not to exceed 12 inches outside diameter. So if it's not to exceed 12 inches outside diameter, how come we have a 12.75 inch outside diameter pipe there?
If I may, that's considered a 12-inch nominal pipeline because the ID is very close to 12 inches.
But it says here not to exceed.
I know.
That's exactly what our thing states.
No, I understand.
Yeah. All right, so there's that. I agree with the schools, you know, and while Adams Middle School is up the hill a little bit, there's that school. We have two major parks that have ball games going on at them all year long. So they're heavily used that are now there as well as a smaller park that is adjacent to it. So I have concerns with that. Where's the other thing? I've got concerns with the lack of testing through the years. The fact that they say that they do it every 5 years and it's now, you know, 6.5 years since the last one. The comments that were not really addressed by the audit. And, you know, there was also a set of required tests for, is it pronounced cathodic?
Yes.
Protection survey or test frequency, pipe to soil once each year, but with intervals not exceeding 15 months. Now, the information that was put in there, and I'd have to go back in there, is this part of CRC's testing requirements that they've set for themselves, or is this a federal testing that requires all of this?
I can't say with certainty, but I do know that pigging and looking for metal loss would pick up because you're taking 31 samples every inch. If there was a need for any of those, you would pick it up.
Let me go to that page to find out who was requiring these things.
Let's see.
This is the O and M section, so I'm assuming that these are from CRC.
Sure.
Yeah, I would assume that these are from CRC. So these
What packet page?
well, the question I had, I think, was on 684,
Okay.
but I'm trying to get back to the beginning of it. There's quite a few pages of it. I mean, they have set so many different things in there for their testing. So these procedure updates by CRC. Yeah, these are procedure updates by CRC.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, all right. What was the next question I have? Get back to my page. The other concern I have is that the two areas of corrosion, one was in Byron, one was in Antioch. So Is there, and I know one of them was caused by the 4x4 posts that were installed near the pipeline. But you know, the soil here, I mean, have they been doing soil testing? Because there is some corrosion, external corrosion that's taking place. In addition to that, even when they go in and dig down in there, they're finding other areas that weren't picked up by the pig. So while you may be getting all of those readings from the pig, they are missing things that are in there. So that's a concern.
Sure. Well, they won't pick up soil, but they will pick up if the soil is affecting the pipe.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. And that's why if you look at these standards, what they're saying is, if we have to do this, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But if you're pigging every 5 to 7 years and you have a low corrosion rate like you do here, then you only move to these cathodic protection methodologies if you have an issue.
Yeah.
But we don't have that issue.
Okay, well, that is that's I still have concerns. You know, I suggest if we do anything, our next steps would be to go into closed session on this.
Sure.
So I appreciate your time.
Councilmember Mendoza.
We know that Antioch denied the permit. And is this the same line that Antioch is using?
You know, I don't know that. I assume it's the same line if it's going through there.
Okay, when you did the test, so if they denied the permit, there shouldn't be anything running through it. When you tested it, was there anything running through it? Was there any gas or any oil or anything?
You mean when a pig goes through the pipeline?
Yeah, when there was being tested.
So we didn't perform any testing.
We didn't do any testing. We're looking at the results by the contractors.
Okay, so how do we know if there was anything in there?
There almost certainly is to push the pig through. Now, it could have been air, could have been gas.
Okay, I agree with Councilmember Rary. I would like to go into closed session to discuss this further. I don't think there's anything else I would need right now.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
I wanted to go back to the question you asked earlier, Mayor, from staff. Does anyone know how much life this pipeline still has in regards to what it's currently doing? I know in listening to the consultant that this pipeline could be used for other things, but currently, how much life does we still have in regards to what it's being used for?
Sure. There's a standard calculation methodology for establishing life. But if you're repairing dents whenever they get to a certain threshold, in other words, putting a fiberglass wrap at those locations, this pipeline would easily have a 100-year life.
Yeah, Glenn, I think at one of our other meetings, our staff or someone had mentioned how much more time that this was going to be used for this specific project. So I'm just wondering if any of the staff were there to be able to. I don't think you'd be able to, Glenn.
Like 10 to 12 years, I think they said they have left of gas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I remember something like that. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
No.
No, I said thank you. Go ahead.
I did have a question for probably Mickey or our legal team. And I'll just read it to be more concise. What is our ability to stop the use of this pipeline? And what is prohibiting CRC from continuing to use it and just say, sue us if you want to, and tie it up in court for the next 10 years. I mean, these are things that if I'm not saying we're making this decision tonight, and clearly it's been recommended we go to closed session, but even if our council were to say we don't want this to be used at all, what kind of ability do we have to make sure that doesn't happen? Or do we have an ability other than taking them to court if they continue to do so?
I'll field that, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, good evening. My answer is I prefer to give those answers in a closed session, because that would be discussing the city's legal position in a matter such as this, and probably not the most appropriate thing to do at this time. So as the council has indicated, if you choose not to move forward with the franchise agreement, either the existing agreement, the most recent agreement, or a revised agreement, and just choose to do nothing, then staff would envision coming back at a future meeting to discuss this in executive session, to talk more about the city's options and what the next steps might be in that regard.
Okay, I'll take that at that time. And thank you very much. Councilmember Mendoza.
I just want to make a motion that we stop our discussion and take this into closed session to review our options.
Second.
Okay. Before we take the vote, Mickey, you have your hand up.
Good evening, Mayor. I just did want to answer one question Councilmember Meyer brought up about a PG&E incident earlier this year. It's my understanding that there were actually 2 incidents and that they were failure of, I believe they were transformers. And I do have an inquiry into PG&E about the cause and to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I'm still waiting to hear back from PG&E. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Mickey.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a first and a second for adjournment. Roll call vote.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, before you adjourn, I believe the motion was to do nothing at this time and revisit the matter in closed session.
That is correct. I apologize. So having that first and second, roll call vote, please.
Before we do that, Councilmember Mendoza, was that meant to be at a future time, or were you expecting to go into this evening?
I'm fine with going into this evening.
Unfortunately, it's not agendized to go into this evening. It'll need to be at a future time.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yep. No, thank you, Councilmember Rary.
Future time.
Roll call vote for that motion. Councilmember Mendoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Rary,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez,
Aye.
Mayor Bryant,
Aye.
motion carries unanimous.
Thank you. I do want to thank the consultants for your very thorough and technical information. It is greatly appreciated. At this time, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Can you tell we want to get going?
Councilmember Mendoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Rary,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Aye.
Mayor Bryant,
Aye.
motion carries unanimous.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you for